And if that meant that he had to leave his post, he would do that. And he would probably also come back and do it again if the club asked him to do that.
The topic of the Manchester United managerial merry-go-round has finally been put to bed, and Erik ten Hag will remain in charge. We're chatting about the Dutchman, the pre-season tour, and a little mention to a certain European Championships. So sit back and enjoy. It's episode number 6. You are all very welcome along to the latest episode of the Theatre of Red. Now, on what is a gloomy, cold and rain-ridden June day, the dark cloud of uncertainty has finally been lifted away from Erik ten Hag, with confirmation midweek that the Dutchman will remain at Old Trafford and has even opened contractual talks about a potential extension on his deal, if you can believe that. I am thrilled to be joined by my first guest from Scandinavia, a fellow journalist and a podcaster at the excellent Manchester United Supporters Club Scandinavia, Mr. Eivind Holth. How are you today, sir?
Thanks, Shaun. I'm good. It's a pleasure to be on your brilliant podcast. Looking forward to it.
Oh, well, it's a pleasure to have you. When the Theatre of Red launched, a mission statement that we held was very high, was the importance of recognition for every member of the fan base, regardless of your location on the planet. One thing that we're all aware of here is that a 3 p.m. kickoff in Manchester is often far from that elsewhere in the world. And on that, I think there's only one place that we need to start. That is, of course, with what I've just mentioned, the news of Ten Hag remaining at the club. Now, for many, I think it was recognition of the importance of sticking to a plan and buying into the ideals of a manager that you work so hard to get to the club in the first place, disregarding a host of reports that speculated of his departure. The Dutchman now appears to be close to agreeing a contract extension, which ultimately contradicts everything that has previously been reported. When David Ornstein confirmed the news on Tuesday evening, what was the general response like in your neck of the world and from yourself?
So we had a poll after the FA Cup final if the fans would like to keep Erik ten Hag, and we had like 95% of our members who would like the manager to stay. We had a new poll the other day, and it was 90%. So I have to say that the Scandinavians, they really wanted ten Hag to stay, and ultimately I think that was the right decision. In the end, it was a very confusing and frustrating process to get to that point that Ten Hag actually were to stay. I think there were 6 candidates, but in the end it seemed like, okay, it's going to be Thomas Frank or perhaps Gareth Southgate, which seemed to be very complicated given the Euros and everything. So I think Ten Hag, it was the correct decision to keep him, but I wonder if they could have have decided on that a bit quicker after the FA Cup final. Now it seems like the momentum and the buzz from the final is gone, and there's a bit of frustration among the fans on how Ineos has treated this and treated him.
It's a valid point. And when you mentioned the poll, there was obviously numerous polls that started transcending around the world via Twitter. The sort of notable ones, and the most famous one I think that came out was from Andy Mitten, very, very close after the FA Cup final. And it was really, really evident that a huge proportion of the fan base were pro Ten Hag, stick to the process, back the manager. And in that, obviously, I've had many conversations with individuals, and I think that despite how favourable those polls looked, I think they would have looked slightly different if you'd gone back a couple of weeks, we'll say after Selhurst Park, with the capitulation against Crystal Palace, because, look, the footballing fan base, let's call a spade, we're part of it, but it is a very, very fickle organisation, and a result can sway the mood and the opinion of people very, very much. You've mentioned that your poll was very, very high, and that the general sense in Scandinavia was that, yes, it's the correct decision. We want the manager to stay. You personally, as a Manchester United footballer, or a Manchester United football fan, I should say,
Yeah, fan.
what?
Not even close.
No, not close, not just yet. But what was your take? How did you feel about the entire situation, disregarding the length of time that it took, we'll say, after the FA Cup final, which I agree, it did take quite some time and it took a lot of the glare off that cup. But how did you feel about the entire situation?
I mean, if Erik ten Hag was not the current United manager, he would be on that list, wouldn't he? If he were to be at Ajax, he would probably be the front runner for being United manager. And if you look at the 2 years he's had, it's been frustrating. It's been complicated with the ownership situation, with the injuries, everything, and. We said that he was kind of on an audition for Ineos, and to be fair, it didn't go quite well. The final, I think, saved him in the end. My main concern is that I do not hope they decided to keep him because of that final. 90 minutes of football shouldn't decide the future of a Manchester United manager. They should take the whole picture into account. But to be honest, like I said, I think when Pochettino was finished at Chelsea, my initial thought was that's bad news for Erik ten Hag. He's probably the strongest candidate along with Thomas Tuchel. But for some reason, they decided that neither Tuchel or Pochettino was good enough, and they wanted to stick with Ten Hag in the end. And I think it's probably good reasons for that, but he has to improve at many areas as a manager. The way they conceded goals last season, we can't really see that in the future. He needs to address that, and I don't think he will get much help from the transfer market this summer, to be honest. A couple of players, of course, not really sure how much they will strengthen the team, so he needs to work with what he has at the moment, and we really need to see improvement quite quickly. He will probably get a new contract, and but nevertheless, he will be experiencing an enormous amount of pressure if he gets off to a bad start for next season.
Well, he certainly is not going to want to start this season as he did last season. When we focus on the names that were mentioned, you've mentioned Mauricio Pochettino. You know, you're looking at the likes of Thomas Frank, Gareth Southgate, Thomas Tuchel. I always draw back to the same reference point. We're looking at Sir Jim Ratcliffe and his Ineos powerhouse. They're famed for being market leaders and best in class at what they do, and they want to be able to bring that best-in-class environment to Manchester United. It seems like the most peculiar scenario that a group of business-savvy individuals would treat a decision of this magnitude in such a scattergun-style way. When you consider the managers that we're mentioning, just take Gareth Southgate and Thomas Tuchel as an example, and they could not be any more different as managers. If you look at the spectrum of managerial traits, attributes, and personalities, they're at the complete opposite spectrum. Thomas Tuchel has been to multiple Champions League finals. He's won trophies in Germany, in England, in France. Gareth Southgate was a club manager with Middlesbrough. I think he averaged something like 26% of a win ratio, and he got them relegated. He's gone and he's taken over an English side that is built on structure and built on adherence to structure. Of course, the manager is going to have some sort of decision regarding selection and tactics and whatnot, but he has to work alongside a set structure that's there. Many people reported that this is why Gareth Southgate was favoured very, very heavily within that rumour mill for the managerial. Not only is he a very good friend with Sir Dave Brailsford, he has no problem adhering to structure. But then you look at Thomas Tuchel, and he is the complete opposite. He very much dislikes adhering to hierarchical structure. He wants to be able to go out and impose his will on a game. He wants to be able to go out and impose his will on a transfer market and bring in the players that he wants. And we've seen through Chelsea, through Paris Saint-Germain, through Borussia Dortmund, even down to Bayern Munich most recently, that this is a guy almost taking notebooks out of the Jose Mourinho style of management in terms of, if I do not get my own way, I'm going to attack the hierarchy and I'm going to do it publicly. So I feel like the scattergun approach that was taken throughout the media, or at least how it was portrayed in the media, made no sense whatsoever. And call me naive, but I think what I'm looking at is trying to ignore an awful lot of the reports as fictitious, because maybe now we are having a football decision made by footballing individuals. Those leaks that have plagued the club for so long appear to be disappearing.
I completely agree. I think Ineos is in with a fresh approach in football. Obviously, they've had success in cycling with Sky and everything, and I think they're doing things in their own way, like the season end review, which is not very common thing in football. Really, football clubs tend to sack the manager if they can save European football, for instance. In this case, Ineos, they decided to stuck with Ten Hag, although there were obviously reports that he was going to be sucked after the final, regardless. And like you say, there have been reports about Pochettino, about Southgate, about meetings with Tuchel, but it doesn't seem that those leaks are coming from the club or from the Ineos camp. It seems that they're coming from elsewhere, and I was told that even the staff at Carrington had no idea which direction Ineos was going for the past 2 weeks. So it's been, this information has been with Ratcliffe and Brailsford, and the inner circle, and it doesn't seem anything is leaking out from them, which is it's a new world for Manchester United fans to be in.
It's an absolute breath of fresh air is what it is. And I have to say, from a personal perspective, I tweeted in the last 24 or 48 hours acknowledging the difficulty that we face as journalists. It's a very, very difficult industry, and it's a very, very thankless industry. There's been an awful lot of individuals that covered this story with integrity, but then there's been an awful lot of individuals within our industry that maybe tried to get ahead with some fictitious information. And maybe a small side of me is quite happy that it has turned out as it is. But at last, we can now focus on football, at least for the time being, amidst the inevitable transfer rumour mill that is upon us. You as well, very much looking forward to Rosenborg coming up on July 15th. Presumably, given your location, it's going to be rather difficult to get a ticket for that out your way. Will you and yours be attending, or what's the plans?
Yeah, we're attending. We're having an event on the match day there, and hopefully get some interviews with some of the players. Obviously, it's been like a tradition now to go to Norway for Manchester United in pre-season. Jose Mourinho loved it here because it was also well planned from the organizers. It was so easy to come to Norway. Compared to what we see in Asia and the States. And but this time they're actually going to Trondheim, which is quite further north than Oslo, and they're going to play Rosenborg, which you might know from Champions League in the 90s. They're not anywhere near Champions League level now, but they have a nice stadium, and I think it should be a nice way to kick off the preseason. And obviously, we were quite concerned about the amount of first team players that would be in action, given the Euros final is on the Sunday before, so just 20 hours before this game. But now there could be a few with Rashford as the biggest one, I guess.
The manager even addressed this in the last 24 hours, that supporters can expect a kind of a mishmash of experienced first team players, veterans, alongside the next crop. I suppose what you might be very, very lucky to see, you might see quite a bit of representation from United's golden generation. You know, the new golden generation of the under-18 treble-winning side. Been told there's going to be quite a lot of those players that can expect a little bit more integration into first-team proceedings. And Erik ten Hag has proven that he very, very much trusts in youth. If you're good enough, you're old enough. And I think you might see some of the future stars lining out there, which should be great.
Into Sheringham, and Solskjaer has won it! Manchester United have reached the promised land.
It's no secret that United holds that huge affinity with Scandinavia, with the region. As you've said, it's become a perennial thing. With players like Jesper Blomqvist, Ronny Johnsen, who celebrated his 55th birthday this week, the great Henrik Larsson, the man that I grew up adoring in Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. And we're going to speak about him in a little bit more detail shortly. But of course, you have current names like Christian Eriksen and Rasmus Hojlund. Now, it has become almost an institution, I believe, for the progression of Danish, Swedish, Norwegian players to aspire towards Old Trafford. I know at an early stage in the 90s, it was always between Liverpool and Manchester United out in that particular generation. You spoke in detail with a player that I'm a huge admirer of recently in Rasmus Hojlund. What was your opinion of the man who has the potential to lead Manchester United for the next decade?
He's a very, very nice guy, very down to earth, and he seems very. He doesn't seems faced by the pressure that he's facing at Manchester United. It was a quite tough season for him, obviously, and all the players at Manchester United. But he said that he's not finished with what he aims for at Manchester United. And we visited his father and some of his coaches back at Copenhagen before the start of the season, and they told us that they've never seen any player with that kind of mental strength, and he's so focused on that, and he has faced many challenges during his career. The way he left Copenhagen was a bit random, I guess, because he wasn't one of the biggest talents in the academy, but he had this will to succeed. And when he went to Storm Graz, he rather took a chance to leave the academy because he didn't feel he was really getting the chances he needed. And then obviously it all kicked off in Storm Graz and later in Atalanta. But to go from being a striker that have scored some goals in Serie A and to go to Old Trafford to be the number one striker for a United team that's having a lot of challenges, that's quite a task for a young striker. And he seemed very, very confident after what's been a tough first season. So yeah, I think there's a lot more to come, and he obviously needs some help from his teammates, I think, to score more than 16 goals next season.
There's two things that are very interesting there that you've said. On one hand, you're speaking about a young striker being pulled out of almost obscurity and landed in the number 9 position to lead Manchester United in the Premier League. For one, if that doesn't highlight the inexplicable failings of hierarchy in years gone by, nothing ever will. But another line that you mentioned was how he took the opportunity to get up and root out of the academy, and that where he wasn't getting the type of chances that he felt that he deserved, to take an opportunity elsewhere. And that just shows the character that he has, the mental strength that he has. And I think that really, really came to fruition when he landed in Manchester. And despite his inexperience at that sort of level, in a melting pot that is Old Trafford, he really, really kicked on. Now, when he found his form, there was no stopping him. I mean, he's now become the youngest ever striker to score in 6 consecutive games. As well as that, his goal contributions from December onward, not even factoring in the Champions League, which he had a splendid record in, he really, really set his stall amongst anybody who maybe had any doubts about him that, you know what, maybe this is a guy that we can build our forward line around. And I think ultimately what really, really shone as we progressed through the season was the lack of ball that he was receiving from his wide men. I stand to take the grasp on the point on that with the likes of Alejandro Garnacho, he's also young. He's also learning his trade. These are invaluable years that you have with Hojlund, Garnacho, Meno behind, Amad Diallo coming in on the right. They're all learning together and they're trying to cultivate an understanding. I think what he has gone through, he's really, really learned on the battlefield in a difficult year. And for me, regardless of not coming out with 20 plus goals, I think he can hold his head very, very high after what was more than an admirable year in a difficult front line, in a difficult league, when he wasn't receiving ball and trying to learn his own way, when there's so much uncertainty off the field. I think that Manchester United have got themselves a guy who genuinely can lead them into this new dawn that Ineos are trying to inspire. And it breeds similarity. You have Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and he's obviously going to be remembered long after you and me. The word legend does not do him justice, and if Hojlund can get even half of the recognition that Solskjaer had at the club, I'm sure he'll be happy. You know Ole since his time with Molde over a decade ago. What was your impression of that man and the decision he made to go to Manchester United as well?
I actually interviewed him shortly before he got the job, and it was a very nice chat about his time at Manchester United. We spoke for 20 minutes just about the final in Barcelona, where he told me that they were not allowed to order regular vodka drinks at the bus. It had to be triple vodka because they won the treble. And I think you cannot underestimate his devotion and the love he has for Manchester United. I think he's perhaps the closest you can. You cannot be more Mancunian without being from Manchester than Ole is. And I think we saw that when he became the manager of the club. The interview he did when he was done, he wanted to do that interview himself. He wanted to say goodbye to the fans in a nice manner, and the tears and everything in that, I think you could see that he was not happy to step aside, but he would do what he could to improve Manchester United. And if that meant that he had to leave his post, he would do that, and he would probably also come back and do it again if the club asked him to do that. So yeah, he's actually been a bit underestimated, I think, in Norway. We took it a bit for granted that he was a Manchester United player scoring goals every week, and I myself is one of a part of the Solskjaer generation that grew up with him and became United fans because of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. And yeah, his I think now we appreciate his reputation as a Manchester United player in a greater sense, as well as we're now fighting the new Norwegian wave in Manchester called Erling Braut Haaland.
Absolutely. And what a new wave that is. When you mention Solskjaer during his time as manager of Manchester United, I share the opinion that many people have, that it was probably, post-Ferguson, the closest that the supporters have felt to the team in terms of the bond that was going on between the players, the coaching staff, the bums and seats, and the fans at home. It was a unique feeling that we have had in what has been a very, very difficult time period. Would you share that amongst all of the names that we have seen since with Louis van Gaal, Jose Mourinho, Solskjaer's time as manager of that club with the backroom team of Kieran McKenna, Michael Carrick, that was about as close as we have been to this football team since Sir Alex Ferguson walked away.
Absolutely. He had been doing the same things at Molde, and I went to the preseason in the States with Mourinho, the last one, which was quite a thing to see with my own eyes, how everything just exploded around the manager, and to see the way Ole came in and brought the culture back from the days of Ferguson. He wanted the academy players to have their lunch with the first team players. He brought the smiles back. He brought the confidence back. He wanted Manchester United to play the United way, and to score goals and to entertain. And he really succeeded with that. The cultural reboot, as he called it himself, for some time, and I think he made the club stronger and brought back a culture that I think Ineos want to build on further.
And with fresh reports of a return to a managerial post for him, a lot of his supporters and sympathizers, even if you can go as far as to say, are happy with the prospect as such. We saw reports of a possible Turkish venture breaking down within the hour through Besiktas last week. And even more recently, we've seen links of a return to the Premier League with Leicester.
Well, he had to stay in Norway for quite some time, because just before he got the job offer from Manchester United, he had promised his wife and his family that now was the time to spend time in Norway together, spend quality time with the family. And then obviously he had to go to Manchester and be there. So I think he needed a break from football, from everything, and that now he's ready to take another job. Not sure about the rumors, but the question in Norway has been whether he would be a candidate to take the national team should Ståle Solbakken get sacked. But it seems he's staying for the moment. But I think that would be a job that Ole quite would be a front runner for, possibly.
And it's not the first international job that he's been mentioned with, because there was quite a bit of time back in Ireland when the managerial pursuit was going on that the bookies actually made Ole Gunnar Solskjaer the favourite to come over and take up the Irish job. There was many Irish Reds jumping for joy when they heard news that he could potentially arrive over here. But I think that's actually a very good shout. Now, you've touched on international, so let's stay there, because the Euros are obviously kicking off today, and England and their players are going to have a huge role and an anticipation of progressing far in the competition. I want to speak about one player who will hope to be involved and has come under a bit of scrutiny recently, and that is Luke Shaw. Now, despite not kicking a ball for Ten Hag's side since limping off the field against Luton, and that was in a Premier League fixture in February, he stepped up his training and his rehabilitation for England ahead of the Euros, while also confirming that he came back from an injury a tad soon mid-season, which has inadvertently led to a prolonged period on the sideline. But it wasn't just that. The player obviously recognised that he has to take his part of the blame, but also took special consideration to mentioning the coaching staff, the manager, and the medical department and the physios, that everyone had to take blame with this. Since his horror injury in 2015, which was phenomenal in its sense that he actually managed to come back from that injury, he's after missing 902 days of play through a variety of injuries, and that has led to 169 fixtures for club and country that he was unfit to line out for. We're looking at a guy who is only a couple of years away from 30, and while obviously one of the best footballers on the field when he's fit, he's critical for both Manchester United and England. We're looking at a period of a new dawn under Ineos and a squad rebuild. You as a supporter, do you think the club should put their eggs in the basket of a player who has suffered so many injuries at this critical part of a rebuild?
First and foremost, I think it's actually quite surprising that Luke Shaw is still at the club. He's had its ups and downs, and injuries has been a huge part of that. But in the end, you have to take his injury history into account. It's a part of the package you get with Luke Shaw, and I think it's quite telling when Ten Hag is talking about his all these injuries, and obviously he the central defenders has been perhaps the biggest problem, but Ten Hag has always mentioned the left back as a problem as well. That Luke Shaw has not been fit. I think that's has had quite an impact on Ten Hag not being able to play the football that he wants to play. So I think a Luke Shaw who's fit and ready to play is a very good left back for Manchester United. But at the same time, we've seen that he needs competition in order to perform the best way he can. He needed Alex Telles to come in and push him. They tried to do the same thing with Malaysia. Didn't quite work because he's been injured as well. But I think they're looking for a new left back in the market this summer. But I don't think it's a replacement for Luke Shaw. I think it might be that kind of a challenger that's probably is thought to be a kind of a backup. But I would like Luke Shaw to succeed, but I'm not sure he will stay fit to ever be the left back that can perform week out and week in, which you need him to be during a whole campaign, not just a few months at a time.
I think a lot of it is going to come down to the situation with Tyrell Malacia as well, because there's been such unknown about the context of what is going on behind the scenes, be it injury or be it personal issues. I think an awful lot of Luke Shaw progressing and staying at the club will balance on what is going to happen with Tyrell Malacia.
It seems very much like one of these Ten Hag signings that haven't really worked at all. I like his playing style, I have to admit. It's very explosive. He seems very quick, and he brings energy with his playing style. But like you say, it's been a bit of a mystery. We didn't see him for quite a few months there, and it's probably been personal problems as well as those injuries. And I'm not sure why, but it's one of those signings that, in hindsight, just doesn't really make sense when Ten Hag should know everything that is to know about Tyrell Malacia. He knowing him from his time in Dutch football, as well as Anthony and Sofian Amrabat, which have also been signings which really hasn't worked at all.
Well, I suppose with Sofian Amrabat, you can look at his last 4 appearances and just, it's one of those kind of what could have been, isn't it? Just on the topic of the Euros, we're not going to spend too much time on it, but I have to ask the question. With Denmark, the only Scandinavian representation in action, will you be cheering on your neighbours?
Well, it's easy to cheer for Denmark with Hojlund and Eriksen now, but there's actually been we're kind of rivals with Denmark, and I think it wasn't too much fun to see them beat Norway a couple of weeks before the Euros now, but yeah, I'll at least cheer for Hojlund and Eriksen, but I think that the main concern here in Norway is that with a team of that quality, if you look at the 11 best players they have now, with Haaland and Ødegaard and Oscar Bob and Sander Berge and everything. They should be in that tournament, but they're not. So we have to watch Denmark, and hopefully we can see Hojlund and Eriksson doing well.
And maybe a certain Ole Gunnar Solskjaer can help you get to the next tournament. Who knows? But finally, and just on United, what sort of aspirations do you have ahead of the season ahead? And from the early names that are being listed in this rumour mill, where would you like to see the additions added to the squad?
I have to say, I'm really excited about the direction that the club now seem to be aiming for players. We've seen links with Brad Branthwaite, Lenny Yoro, Joao Neves, and these are players that's in a very exciting bracket. I think Ratcliffe has been talking about he doesn't want to sign the Mbappe. He wants to sign the next Mbappe. And for me, that's kind of those players that United now are looking at. It might not be realistic to get Joao Neves from Benfica, which is a player who that's every team in Europe would like to have in their team for the future. I presume, but I like the way they're now thinking. The days when we sign Casemiro and Cavani and those players who's been good in the past, but is nowhere near to be the future of the club. Those days are gone. They need to build a team, and I think there's so much quality in that team with Hojlund, who we spoke about, and Garnacho and Mainu, obviously. Kamvala did a great had a great couple of weeks before he got injured. So I think you can build a very exciting team with a couple of signings this season, and perhaps, and this is probably my biggest hope for the next year, is that we in October, November, December, we don't only talk about what's going on the pitch with Ten Hag's style of play and everything, but that we see how Ineos is building a club and a culture, because the discussion now has been about Sir Jim and Ineos and all these appointments. But when we see Berada, he's when he's in the club in July, and hopefully the signing of Dan Ashworth has gone through, and we have Jason Wilcox there. Sorry, in a new role, I guess, as a technical director. I think it could be really exciting to see the vision that they have for the club the next year, because I think we'll see that they're building the club and the culture in a way that we've never seen with the Glazers.
Before we let you go, you mentioned the events that are to occur in July. For anyone travelling over, how can they get involved and get in contact with you prior to the friendly with Rosenborg?
The easiest thing is probably to get in touch at Instagram, where we'll call United NO, and the same thing on Twitter. So there will be, like I said, an event with some former players in the city center, which is not far from the stadium. That will be on match day, and there will, of course, be pubs for the traveling United fans. So get in touch, and we'll get the information along.
And if anybody would like to have a chat with you after listening to your insight today, how can they reach you on social media?
Most active on Twitter, or on X, which is called now, and I'm just called at Eivind Holth.
Absolutely brilliant. And if you'd like to get in touch with me, as always, you can do so at Shaun Connolly 85. Be sure and drop a follow across every single social platform at theatre_of_red for daily updates across Manchester United. And most importantly, wherever you're listening to this podcast today, it would be greatly appreciated if you hit the subscribe button for every single weekly episode falling into your inbox. It's been a pleasure. Take care. Enjoy the football, and we'll catch you all next week.